We are going to be chatting to someone who is exceptional, someone who's been doing a great job when it comes to his business in particular. Now, he has 2 decades of experience in property with vast knowledge in property and accommodation. Andrew Walker is an experienced property investor with over 20 years of experience, and he is someone who spends a lot of time not only developing the property market, but also educating people in particular more about it. Mr. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you very much for having me on your show.
Awesome. It's a pleasure having you. Now, I want you to maybe just share with our audience as well the journey, because I know that you've started off, from, I would say, humble beginnings when it comes to understanding property, but now you are an expert. Maybe you can just share that journey with us.
Absolutely. So when I first got started in property, I was about 21 years old, and I bought my very first property in Durban. And that was, about 20 years ago, plus minus. But I'd say my journey really began in London back in 2005 when I embarked on a few workshops. And the one thing I realized looking back is how important getting the right education of property market is. There's a lot of people doing property here in South Africa, and we see 2 types of investors, people losing money and people making money. And through my journey, I invested a lot of money into myself, going through courses, getting coaching, getting mentoring. And that is how I managed to build a business in the UK as well as here in South Africa. So at the SA Property Investors Network, that's where we are coaching individuals, we are educating them, and we're showing them how they can make money through property.
Brilliant. I was actually just going to touch on that point in particular. Now, you did create your own network. It is called, the South African Property Investment Network, like you mentioned. But, like you said, I think, everything started with humble beginnings. You spoke about yourself. What was the journey like when it comes to the network? I'm sure you never started off with thousands of members.
No. Right? Yeah. So my very first event, I remember being in Cape Town, actually. And I booked a restaurant in Cape Town. I made these lovely brochures and books. And I get to the event, right, at the restaurant. And like 6:30 came, no one rocked up. 7 o'clock came, no one rocked up. And I thought, oh my gosh, does this actually even work? But I still took photographs of the books. I made it seem like it was busy, but no one was there. And I'll tell you what, there were many times I was going to quit. 2017, I said to my business partner, I was in Joburg going, these networking events, because we'll book the venue, we'll get the sound, we'll get the food. And the whole idea is to build the community, right? So the money's in the database, the money's in the membership, it's in the community of like-minded investors. That's where the power lies. But to get it to where it was now, I'm telling you now, there were times when I said, should we just quit? Throwing money at events, doing events where people don't rock up at the events going, we're putting all this effort in for the community and no one's rocking up. And I guess that's the success of any entrepreneur. It's just being consistent and never, ever giving up. And so it's all those sweat and tears. And I guess over the years, starting from nothing, literally from no one rocking up an event. And I was very proud this last weekend, for example. We had a breakfast in Cape Town, 25 investors, a workshop in Edenvale with 20, a workshop in Bryanston. We're training estate agents. And it's so humbling to look back and go, all that hard work is now paying off. Because we literally now have South Africa's largest property community of investors, and there's different divisions, right? There's a youth division, the women division for advanced investors, a division for people just starting out. And that's why I love what I do.
True. I'm glad that you actually have those different divisions, because you are speaking to a lot of groups that are, previously disempowered.
Absolutely.
So like young people, women as well in the space and in the industry. But let's just touch on another, I would say, an invention that you guys created and another development that has definitely taken South Africa a lot further. And that is the Investor of the Year award that you guys created. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Yes. So the Investor of the Year, I put on back in 2018. Now, you've obviously heard of Pop Idols. You've heard of Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing, but for property investors.
Wow.
So this year, and every year, I want to make it bigger and better and more fun. And the whole idea about it is we go around the country looking for the Investor of the Year. Wow. Now, the great thing is that there is a space for everyone. So there's the beginner category for people that are just buying the very first investment property. Could be a basic buy-to-let. Then there's the intermediate category. So you've got 2 to 5 properties. Then there's the big leagues. These are individuals doing commercial property developments, the bigger guys. But then we've included 2 other divisions this year, which is your youth division and the green division. Now, we'll put you into one of the 5, And then out of the 5, there's 5 other categories: township investing, inner city investing, SAPIN women, the most innovative category. So there's literally a home for everyone, and we're super proud to be sponsored by Absa Bank. Absa is going to be the main sponsor for the event. Then we've got Bolt Private Property, Tal Africa, and a whole range of other sponsors back in this great initiative.
Brilliant. I mean, we're going to chat a lot more about some of the sections that you did speak about. I know you spoke about young people and the township economy.
Yes.
We're going to touch on another economy, which is, the university economy in particular. But before we get on to that, I know that you guys have an aim or a specific golden goal that you want to achieve, and that's to get about 1 million members, under the network. I mean, what's the impact of having 1 million members? What will it do to South Africa?
No, it's massive. So what we do through SAPIN, you see, I always talk about education without action or opportunities is a complete waste of time. Because you can get as educated as you want, but if you don't do anything with it, nothing happens. At the same time, going out there and taking action without the education is deadly. So my belief is that the more people we get going through, it's how do we give the education as point number 1? How do we support that individual? But the game changer is the opportunity that, especially the youth, is giving the youth the opportunity, work placement, helping them start a business in the property world. So everything we do is property related. So there's a property investment side, but there's a property entrepreneur side. How do you set up a cleaning business? It might be that some of the youth want to become a bond or work for a bank or become a valuer. So what we've done in 2022 is we took a big group of youth, and we did exactly that. We put them in a classroom, we educated them, we then went out with them to view properties, we got special speakers in to talk about how to set businesses up, and they set businesses up, and they got bank accounts with Absa Bank, and now we started creating opportunities for them. And these youngsters, and you know what, I doubted the youngsters, but these youngsters have got great ideas. You're talking like 20 years old, 23, they are motivated, they're very inspirational. The biggest thing, the biggest hurdle is you living in a township. Bolt, and fortunately Bolt is a partner of ours as well. They sponsored the youth. Some of these youth can't even get out of the township into the cities. So here's a young person who's eager, hungry, wants to make it, but the Bolt drivers, even the Uber drivers, can't go to certain locations. I'm such in Edenville, Joburg, going, how do we help these guys? So what you started doing is where they have those restrictions, how do we bring them into the cities, give them the education? The biggest thing is start placing them either in a workplace, but if they're entrepreneurial, how do we help them set up a sustainable business so they can support themselves and their family? That's awesome.
Brilliant.
And that's exciting.
Our young people are extremely brilliant in South Africa, without a doubt. But let's make it a little bit easier for them. A lot of them are about to, go to university now. A lot of the universities actually start end of February, so we're going to see them at all the universities around South Africa, but we're also going to see them at TVET colleges and the like,
Yeah.
But a lot of them are going to be looking for accommodation around these universities. Maybe you can give us some advice. What should these students look for when it comes to accommodation around universities?
Yeah, and it's a very good question, because recently there's been quite a few scams with landlords, and that tenant's either going to be a private tenant and go to a private landlord and choose a property close to a university, or they'll go through an ASPIS and go down that road. I'd first of all say the first thing is make sure wherever they're staying, whatever property it is, that it's actually the right property, i.e. it is the right landlord that do own it. Do not go give 6 months up front or anything like that. That's one of the recent scams where tenants are being told, yes, there's your accommodation, please pay 3 months in advance or 6 months in advance. It was on carte blanche the other night. And it's a very common thing happening. So with these students, they must go through a reputable letting agent. They must check out the letting agent, how long have they been around for, maybe work on references, go into the university, and just don't rush into any accommodation, and make sure that if the accommodation said there's a desk and there's a chair or there's a TV, for example, that when actually that it's stated in the lease that it is fully furnished. There's a situation where a student signed the lease, paid the rent, got to the room, and there's no desk or chair. Landlord turns around and says no, but it wasn't part of the lease, and in the lease it didn't state it. So that tenant had to go buy a desk and a chair. And you wouldn't think that this kind of thing happens, right? But it does.
Is it quite common? It happens a
No,
lot.
it's common because of through SAPIN. So in the month of January, February, all our events are around students' accommodation. So naturally, this is where we hear all the stories. And it comes down to you don't know what you don't know. And some of these tenants, they're young, right? They're students. And they don't know what they don't know. So it's very easy for a landlord to say, oh, please give me 6 months rent. There's rooms in demand, blah, blah, blah. Next thing, they take the money and they run. So my advice is make sure that you're going through a reputable letting agent, or you're going into the university, you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and just make sure that you do read through the lease.
Yes.
Everyone decides it but never reads it.
So, okay, let's maybe look at then, I mean, it's a very important point that you made, so maybe we need to address it as well. And that is that when it comes to landlords, sometimes, unfortunately, in South Africa, education is an issue, right?
Yes.
Sometimes they're not knowledgeable on what accreditation they might need or what type of certification that they need.
Sure.
Maybe perhaps you can share with us when it comes to, maybe there's some, landlords out there that are watching right now.
Yes.
What would they need in terms of accreditation?
Yeah, absolutely. So every university is going to be slightly different. The best advice I can give: go into the university, ask for the director of student accommodation in any university, ask for what their accreditation looks like, i.e., the rooms need to be a certain size. Is the room en suite or is it not en suite? If it's not en suite and there isn't a bathroom, how many rooms are sharing the communal bathroom and the communal kitchen? Now, all the universities, well, Stellenbosch might be slightly different to Tux, it might be slightly different to Wits. So just go into the university. Most universities will have the information at NSFAS online, and then it'll say if you want to get accredited, exactly, the property must be X amounts of miles away from the university, the rooms must be a certain size, and you've got to tick certain boxes.
Okay. I know a lot of students in particular try to save as much money as they possibly can.
Course.
Let's look at some of the hacks or some of the cheat codes when it comes to the property industry. What can make it easier for them to pay less when it comes to student accommodation?
What, the tenants themselves?
Yeah, the tenants themselves.
So
Students.
The tenants are there and they want to pay less rent. Well, first of all, their rent will be paid if it's by NSFAS, number one, so they aren't paying any rent, which is great. If they're going down the private road, first of all, the landlords want their rent, so I don't think they're going to get cheap rent. So I don't know of any situations where tenants got a bargain off the rent, to be honest. I know some of the landlords are getting like about 3,500 rand per tenant now, or per bed, and the tenant's got nothing to do with that. Go straight to the landlord. So yeah, look, I haven't had that experience because the reason landlords do student accommodation is that they want to make good money from the tenants. So from my personal experience, I haven't seen any hacks. And if they are out there, I don't know about it.
Okay, so and then let's just look at people wanting to own their first properties, because it does happen sometimes. Maybe
Yes.
the parents perhaps think it's a better investment opportunity. So we do know that the government allows for policy to be able to subsidize some of the fees when it comes to someone's first property. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, we're definitely seeing the younger generation. There's definitely a trend now where they aren't necessarily interested in buying a property for themselves to live in, or even buying a car. There's Bolt, there's Uber, and they're looking to rent now or stay with mom and dad, but they want to invest into property. So at SAPIN, we do a lot of what we call one-day workshops around, you're a first-time investor. How do you actually buy the first property? What does that process look like? How do you get pre-qualified by, say, Uber Home Loans or the bank? And then, yes, look, from a government point of view, it's called FLISP, F-L-I-S-P, but there's certain criteria. So you've got to have a dependent, so it wouldn't really necessarily be for a single young person. You've got to be earning X amount of rands in that household. There's certain criteria, but they will give you, say, up to 100,000 rand as an example to go towards your fees for the property. And most banks still these days are giving 100% bonds. Absa Bank will give you 105% bond as an example if you are a professional or you're a doctor, whatever the case might be.
Brilliant. Just in closing, Andrew, before we let you leave,
Yes.
to all the young people out there, what advice do you have for them when it comes to property and building up wealth in South Africa?
Absolutely. So my advice to them is that they're starting at the right age, number one. Number two, they have a great opportunity to set up their structure correctly and purchase the right property investments. Remember, they're young and you don't know what you don't know, right? So don't go rush into anything, because often on the front of a glossy brochure, the investment looks amazing, so they pay the money or they go forwards with it and they make mistakes. They're buying the wrong entity, they pay too much. So my advice to them is come along to some educational workshops. Understand, how to run the numbers, the return on investment, the gross yield, your area research, your due diligence. At least when you do buy the property, you have exit strategies and you know exactly why you're buying the property. And if you get it right at a young age, you'll make a lot of money in property.
Brilliant. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.